The Free Thinker Show. Ignite your mind, challenge the norm.
All right, deep divers, buckle up. We are diving headfirst into the 2024 election today. We're going to unpack a wild episode of the PDD podcast. You know, the one with Patrick Bet-David? Yeah, that's the one. He always gets people fired up. But before we get into it, just a quick reminder, we're not here to tell you what to think. We're going to break down the claims, separate the facts from the fiction, and hopefully figure out why these kinds of discussions get so much attention. So we've got Patrick Bet-David himself, obviously, and he's got two commentators with him. We'll call them Commentator 1 and Commentator 2 for simplicity, and let me tell you, they don't hold back. Oh, and did I mention Elon Musk makes a surprise appearance? Yeah, Elon Musk, the Tesla, SpaceX, X guy. He dropped some pretty big claims about the election.
I can only imagine. What kind of claims are we talking about here?
Well, for starters, he says that some billionaires are terrified of a Trump victory. He specifically names Reid Hoffman, the LinkedIn guy, and even Bill Gates. And the reason? Musk suggests it all comes down to this mysterious client list.
A client list. That sounds ominous. What's supposed to be on this list?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? He doesn't really say, but he implies that if Trump wins, this list will be revealed, and it's going to expose something pretty bad. He even brings up Bill Gates' connection to Jeffrey Epstein, says Melinda Gates wasn't a fan of their relationship either.
It's interesting how this idea of a hidden client list plays into those fears some people have about powerful figures operating in the shadows. Whether it's true or not, the mere suggestion is enough to get people talking.
For sure. And it doesn't stop there. Musk also throws out some pretty bold predictions. Like, he says there could be a 700% increase in immigration to swing states if Harris wins. He even shared a chart on X to back it up. Now, we haven't checked those numbers ourselves, but it does make you wonder about the role demographics play in all of this. Could we see a wave of new voters, and how would that affect the outcome?
That's the big question. There's no doubt that shifts in demographics can change the electoral map. But it's not as simple as saying one causes the other. Just because you see a change in population, that doesn't automatically translate to a predictable voting bloc. People's political views are influenced by so many different things, it's rarely as straightforward as linking demographics directly to voting patterns.
So Musk is out there making these claims, and the PBD podcast hosts are eating it up. They seem surprised that Musk, who they saw as more liberal, is suddenly backing Trump. They spend a lot of time talking about his reasoning, his whole thing about fighting the woke mind virus, his worries about his child's gender transition, his stance on free speech. It's like they're trying to understand what's driving this change in him.
And it's not just him, right? We're seeing this kind of realignment all over the political spectrum these days. People who used to identify with one party are now switching sides. And a lot of them are pointing to these cultural issues as the reason why. It's becoming less about the traditional party lines and more about aligning with the voices that match their own values and anxieties. We're seeing the whole game change right in front of us, which is pretty fascinating.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The conversation shifts to Kamala Harris, and they start talking about the idea of her being a puppet, like someone else is pulling the strings.
A puppet. Wow. Who do they think is controlling her?
They don't exactly say, but they make comparisons to past presidents and the people who they believed were really calling the shots behind the scenes. It's a familiar tune, right? This idea that powerful people are secretly manipulating things.
Oh, definitely. That puppet master idea has been around forever, especially in politics. That's almost comforting for some people to believe in, They would rather blame a mysterious group than accept that it's just a bunch of complex events and systems at play.
It's way easier to point the finger at a shadowy figure than to actually try to understand the nuances of the situation.
Exactly. It gives them a sense of control in a world that can feel very unpredictable and overwhelming. But we have to be careful not to buy into those narratives blindly without looking at the evidence or lack thereof in many cases.
Speaking of buying into narratives, the guys bring up the whole family values thing, and it gets a little weird.
Oh, how so?
Well, they point out, kind of sarcastically, that people like Kamala Harris, Taylor Swift, Chelsea Handler, all very vocal about abortion rights. None of them have children. Then they contrast this with Trump and his inner circle, who have lots of kids. It's like they're trying to imply something there.
Like having kids makes you more qualified to weigh in on abortion.
I think that's the implication, yeah.
That's a pretty dangerous generalization. While it's true that demographics and family structures can influence your worldview, you can't just make blanket statements like that. It completely disregards the individual choices and experiences of women. To suggest that someone who supports abortion rights is somehow less family-oriented is not only inaccurate, It's incredibly insensitive.
Yeah, it's definitely a very complex issue. They're trying to make it way too black and white.
Absolutely. And it shows just how easily these discussions can devolve into stereotypes and oversimplifications.
Now, one thing these guys definitely know how to do is put on a show. They spend a good chunk of time hyping up their big election night party.
Oh, yeah, I heard about this. They're going all out, right?
Oh, yeah. They call it the biggest election party in the country. Outside of the official ones, of course. They've got Brian Callen, Sammy the Bull, Gravano, as in that Sammy the Bull, former mobster Michael Franzese, comedian Dave Smith. And get this, they even have a dress code. Future looks bright attire.
They've definitely tapped into something. Their brand is this interesting mix of politics, pop culture, and controversy. And people love it.
It makes you wonder, right? Is all this passionate commentary coming from a place of genuine concern? Or is it just fear-mongering and conspiracy theories?
That's the million-dollar question. And honestly, it's one that each listener has to grapple with on their own. We know there's a lot of conspiratorial thinking out there, but we also can't discount the very real anxieties fueling it.
It's a tough line to walk, trying to find that balance between acknowledging legitimate concerns without getting swept up in unsubstantiated claims. It's just so easy to get sucked into that echo chamber, surrounded by people who already agree with you.
Oh, tell me about it. And that's why it's more important than ever to really think for yourself. Double-check those headlines, the ones that seem too crazy to be true. They often are. And make sure you're getting your information from different sources, not just the ones you agree with, especially during an election.
Don't just scroll through your feed and nod along. You got to get out of your comfort zone. Question your own assumptions. Hearing different viewpoints, even if you don't like them, it just makes you more informed.
100%. It's like looking at the world through different lenses. You might be surprised by what you see.
So we've talked about a lot today. Bold claims, shifting alliances, anxieties about the future. But here's the takeaway. Whether you buy everything said on that PBD podcast or not, its popularity speaks for itself. It shows there's a real sense of unease out there. People want answers. They want a future that feels less uncertain.
And that's important to pay attention to. It gives us a glimpse into the minds of voters in 2024. They're dealing with a lot. A changing world, economic worries, and a media landscape that's overflowing with information, some true, some not.
So next time you find yourself glued to some political debate online, take a step back. Ask yourself, what are the real issues here? What's fact and what's fiction?
At the end of the day, we all have a responsibility to be critical thinkers, to keep an open mind, and to keep searching for the truth, even when it's tough to find.
And that's a wrap on this deep dive. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to the PBD podcast episode and all the other resources we talked about. Until next time, stay curious and keep those critical thinking caps on.